So we'll start. Obviously, the Bills, good team, big expectations going into next season. But at the same time, there's things that they can do to improve their roster. Just from a position standpoint, what do you think they should be targeting early in the draft?
Yeah, I think corner's the one that comes to mind first. Finding a player that fits into what they want to do defensively. As we know, Sean McDermott is kind of the cornerback whisperer, so it does not necessarily need to be in round one where they draft a corner. They've maybe had more success in the later portions of the draft with corners than in the early portions of the draft. That being said, it's going to be hard to resist if one of these top corners is available, either with their first round pick, number 30 overall, or one of those 2 second-round picks that they have in the back half of the round. I think wide receiver and edge rusher, but a specific type of wide receiver is probably what I'm referring to. They kind of have that slot area covered with signing of Josh Palmer, who does have more verticality than Curtis Samuel, but between him and Khalil Shakir and Curtis, we'll see what his role is and what his status is on the roster going forward. But if they could find a wideout who brings some size and perimeter ability somewhere in rounds 2 or 3, to me, would be a logical spot to address as well. And then, I'll point to defensive tackle and edge rusher, just some pure girth in the middle of the defensive line. I'm not saying you have to make your draft about just one game, but we think back to the AFC Championship game last year and some of those gotta-have-it situations. The Chiefs were able to get the Bills off the field, and the Bills were not able to get the Chiefs off the field. And that, to me, was one of the sort of deciding factors in that game.
Yeah, specifically at defensive tackle, I think there's a couple players that Bills fans have really kind of zeroed in on. Kenneth Grant, Derek Harmon, they're probably at the top of the list just from where the Bills are picking. How do you think players like that would fit into what the Bills are trying to do?
Yeah, Kenneth Grant is a mountain of a man. He's 331 pounds. He was around 6'4" at the combine. He is just gigantic. He is a hard guy to run against. Again, not one game does not determine a player's ability or draft stock, but the Ohio State game was sort of a teach tape for both he and Mason Graham in terms of how to dominate the line of scrimmage. So Kenneth is just this guy that just based off mass alone is going to present a challenge to get going against in the running game. Derek Harmon is a big man in his own right, but I think the superior pass rusher to Kenneth Grant. Harmon, who spent 2 seasons at Michigan State and then transfers to Oregon for his final year, led all FBS defensive tackles and pressures from a defensive tackle alignment last year with 35, 6 more than anybody else in the entire country. So he gets after it now. Sack production is one stat that we all love, but I just think general sort of chaos causing is perhaps just as important at that defensive tackle spot, because you can force quarterbacks off their spot. You can get them to try to break the pocket. But Derek Harmon, to me, may be a more well-rounded player than Kenneth Grant. But if you're looking for a guy who on 3rd and 1 is going to present a real challenge for the defense to move, Kenneth Grant is a hard guy to get going.
Okay, so those 2 guys are the earlier options, but what if they stay and they do like a corner in the first round? Darius Alexander, we're familiar with Maction up here in Buffalo. Yeah. So what would he be a smart addition for them as kind of like a second-round target?
Yeah, Darius had a great pre-draft process. Played 6 years at Toledo and capped his career off in style. His pick 6 in the bowl game was one of the better big man touchdowns that you'll see in quite some time. And Darius went down to the Senior Bowl and looked like a play wrecker. He too has some real interior pass rush ability and a guy who's got very good length as well. I've got him right around player 50 on my big board overall. So that sweet spot of where the Bills make their first of 2 second-round picks. So I think Darius has a chance to be there if either one of those spots would make some sense as well if the team were to address corner in the first round with a player like a Trey Amos from Ole Miss, Max Hairston from Kentucky, maybe even Azareye'h Thomas from Florida State, who really impressive tape this past year, 6'1.5", 200-plus pounds. Had a pedestrian 40 time, though. Scouts told me it was somewhere in that 4.56 to 4.6 range at his pro day, which, in a zone heavier scheme like the Bills, of course, are willing to run, they can probably make that concession more so than teams that are looking to put their corners on islands and have them kind of do the work all by themselves.
Trey Amos is the guy that I think if the Bills draft a cornerback, a lot of fans are kind of zeroing in on. What should they know about him and what kind of addition would he be?
He's a 3-school prospect, began his career at Louisiana and then spent a year at Alabama, then a year at Ole Miss, which that may have sounded unique a decade ago, but that's just how college football and college sports are in general. I saw a stat from ESPN about the Final Four of basketball, how 11 of the 20 starters from the Final Four transferred at some point in their career, which means that of the 9 remaining players, you take away the freshmen like Cooper Flagg and couple other Duke starters, and it's like, wait, so like one starter or two starters, and the entire Final Four was at the same school that he began his career at and was not a freshman. It's a wild time in college sports, to say the least. But goes to Alabama, finishes up at Ole Miss. An excellent size, 6'1", ran very well at the combine, 4.43. I thought coming out of the season, he might be more like a 4.5 40 time. That being said, he ran that blazing 40 times. He's got good size. He's got excellent ball skills. He finds the football and experienced, has a great spirit about him as well. You can sort of see the competitive fire when he is on the field. So Trey Amos would make a lot of sense. I have him as 40th on the big board, but not a reminder, but an announcement for those that haven't heard me say this previously. I really view this year's draft class to have a lot of similarity between players 25 and 45. The variance in my grades is very minimal. Like, if you told me to wake up tomorrow and defend the player who I currently have at 40 as much closer to 25, I'd have no issue in doing that.
Yeah, and I'm addicted to mock drafts, like I'm sure everybody is, because they're the best. And I sit there on the mock draft simulator with ESPN, and occasionally, like Jahdae Barron will fall. And I'm like, why in the world is this guy falling? Now, I understand that's probably not going to happen. Yeah. Is that a pipe dream for the Bills if they stay put? Is there any chance he slips?
Yeah, probably unlikely that he slips to 30, but anything is possible. You know, Jahdae had an amazing final season, 11 pass breakups, 5 interceptions for Texas. Probably the most instinctive defensive back in the entire draft class, super versatile as well. You know, there's talk of whether he could be, is he a perimeter corner only? Could he be a slot corner only? Could he be a safety as well? He's got some exposure playing at safety, and the answer ended up being, by the end of the process, he can be everything, right? Kind of a Chauncey Gardner-Johnson-like prospect coming out of Florida a handful of years ago, with a little less edge and crazy to him. Is CJ is a great player who also has, he's not afraid to mix it up and get other people going. But Jahdae, he's kind of clean. 4.39 40, really good production, very experienced player. And I think the question probably would be, if he does slide, it's people are not totally convinced that, is he going to be a pure perimeter man-to-man corner? But I still think he ends up going somewhere in the top 25 picks. I've got him inside my top 20 of prospects overall. So Jahdae is a really good player, probably not likely for the Bills at number 30.
When you talked about wide receiver at the beginning, you said the Bills need a specific type of wide receiver, and I certainly agree. It's, a speed guy who can stretch the field. The names that immediately come to mind, Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bonds, like, are those the players that they kind of make the most sense?
Yeah, and I think that Golden might be gone. He'll probably be gone as well by 30. So if we're talking about players that could be available between 30 and let's call it 62 or whatever that second round pick is for the Bills, it's guys like, if they wanted to get aggressive on Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, 4.47 at 40 at the combine at 6'2" and 217 pounds. There's an example. You mentioned Isaiah Bond, who I think the range for Bond is as early as round 2 and perhaps as late as like late 3, early 4. Bond is just like, this guy is juice. A lot of juice there for Isaiah Bond, a guy who started his career at Alabama, then finished at Texas. Alec Ayomanor from Stanford, Canadian kid who I don't know if he grew up a Bills fan, right? I got to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But Ayomanor can fly as well. Ran a really good 40 at 4.45 at the combine. He can go, that much is for sure. So there are a few guys that kind of fit into that category. Kyle Williams from Washington State as well. Not a lot of size there for Kyle, but he finished with a blaze last year. 9 receiving touchdowns over his final 6 games, and that kid can totally fly as well. He had some great battles in his college career with Travis Hunter. Speaks to the kind of wide receiver you'd be getting.
Yeah, and Buffalo loves Kyle Williams. We know that. Yeah. So another Kyle Williams would not be a bad thing.
I thought about that part.
My last one for you. Is there a player that you just love as a fit for the Bills, whether it's somebody we've already talked about or somebody we haven't mentioned, where you're like, yeah, that guy just makes a lot of sense in Buffalo?
Yeah, Amos is probably the one that I think about the most often for the Bills, just because of the style of play they want to roll out defensively, and then also the style of play that Amos has available in his bag. Man, I'll tell you what, it's a great problem to be picking at 30, because it means you're one of the best teams in the NFL. It sure makes finding perfect fits, though, a whole lot harder, right? It's easier if you ask me that question about, the Browns at number 2, so I could sit here and wax poetic about Travis Hunter.
Beautiful. Thank you, Fields. I very much appreciate the time.
Thank you.